the Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show on Indian television where you, the MSME, get center stage. This is ET Now's special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center in every industry and area that matters to you. Tonight, we're bringing you part 1 of a very special conversation with none other than the president of NASSCOM, R Chandrasekhar. My colleague, Samriti Grover, caught up with him earlier. Take a look.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for joining us on the Leaders of Tomorrow. It truly is a pleasure to have you on our show. You know, I have to begin by asking you, you have a really challenging job. You are spearheading the Trade Association of India's IT industry, which is an industry which is so dynamic and ever-changing. How has the journey been? You know, also the journey of NASSCOM, because it's been almost 30 years since its inception. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think this journey has had many facets to it. Aside from the obvious one of growing from an industry which was barely a few $1 million to today over $150 billion. But it's not just the numbers, that's the least of it. The big changes have been in terms of the kind of work that the industry does, in terms of the kind of diversity which has grown in the industry, in terms of the spread of the industry across the globe, and today in terms of what it is helping the clients to accomplish by the work that they do.
So if I had to ask you, can you highlight, let's say, 3 major changes that you've seen in the industry over the last 10 years, so to say? What would that be?
I think first and foremost is the fact that today it's not just about delivering IT. It is about delivering business value and a business outcome for the companies that they serve. And in an age where everything is going digital and where that has become the essence of competitiveness, there can't be anything that is more core to the survival and continuing competitiveness of any company. So that is one really big change. The second is with the advent of digital, there's a whole new sort of genre of companies and entrepreneurs who have come up, who are number one, perhaps deeper into technology, who are very agile and innovative and nimble in the way that they do business, and many of them are also establishing big businesses within the country as well. So these, I think, are some of the very significant changes which have come about and which characterize the industry today.
So do you see hiring for the IT industry to sort of look up in some ways, whereas hiring new talent is concerned and maybe the initial salary structures are concerned?
First and foremost, if you look at the hiring and employment, that of course is driven by the demand, and we are definitely seeing and hearing from all the analysts as well as from the trends that while there is no dramatic immediate uptick in terms of the demand, going forward in the latter part of the current financial year and in 2018 in general, the expectation is that there would be a significant rise in global spending on IT in general and IT services in particular. The share of the IT industry in India, which is what NASSCOM represents, is not only holding steady but is actually going slowly up, though not by a huge amount, but we are already at 56–57% in terms of market share in global sourcing. So that is one part of the story. If you look at employment, the counter trend is that there is also automation which is coming in and which is resulting in lesser number of people being required to do the same quantum of work. So in a sense, it's a race between growth in employment opportunities as well as needs, driven by growth in the in the demand and in the volume, and on the other side is a reduction driven by automation and greater resort to other things like artificial intelligence and so on. Right now we are seeing that there is still a net growth of around 4 to 5% in hiring. So, one dimension is the growth due to rising demand and volumes. The other is the falling employment implication because of automation. While revenues have been growing by about 8%, net employment has been growing by about half that quantum. Right. And the proportion between the two is also gradually reducing. So, that trend will continue because these are secular long term trends and fairly stable. Nothing dramatic, but the direction is very clear.
So, you see hiring to be on a slower pace definitely in the next year or two to come.
Again, I would like to qualify that the hiring within the IT industry would continue to follow this pattern, but the hiring in IT outside of the IT industry is rising, because as IT is permeating every sector of the domestic economy, the need for technically skilled people is rising in every segment of the economy.
So every business is now a technology business.
Exactly. Every business is a technology business, and therefore, and also value has shifted a little more to the junction points between technology and domain. And therefore, one needs to look at the employment question through a much wider lens than in the past, and it is not meaningful to talk about employment in the IT sector itself in isolation.
I am glad you talked about that, because we have a lot of MSME players who write into us with their queries, and one of the major problems that they have written to us with is about retaining talent. So, what tips would you have for our MSME enterprises, because there are larger peers who are in the same space that are maybe offering better opportunities, definitely better salaries. Yeah. So, how can they deal with that?
I think primary question is whether the MSME concerned is able to bring a unique value proposition to the table. What is its unique selling point? Number two is whether the professional growth of the individual, not in terms of a designation. I am not referring to growth here as growing from a project manager to a senior project manager to whatever. It is of going up the skills ladder and doing work which involves applying those advanced skills. So, is that something which the company is offering? And the third is the room for innovation, because it is common knowledge that it is somewhat easier in a small company environment for people to be innovative and creative to the fullest extent. Large companies, no doubt, are doing their best to create room for individuals to innovate even within the large company framework, but it is always going to be easier in a small enterprise where that is part of their DNA. So, these are the attributes I think which a company needs to instill and nurture if they want to retain talent, and of course, incentivization of the talent in terms of giving them an upside, a sort of share or a stake in the upside. So, ultimately the smaller companies do tend to provide a more conducive framework for people who are more innovative and who come up with newer ideas, newer approaches, and newer technology advancements. So, I think that has to be leveraged on a consistent basis, and the track record has to also demonstrate that the clients are able to leverage that advantage which they get from the MSMEs.
So, obviously I want you to now talk about the buzzword that is GST. The tax reform itself, and what is its impact on the IT industry?
I think this has to be separated into two parts. One is the impact of GST on the industry as a whole, in terms of their operating environment, in terms of their regulatory requirements, in terms of their tax compliance and all these issues related to that. And the second is the business opportunities which arise for those companies which are operating in this space. So, whether they are offering solutions or packages to help companies, especially the smaller and medium companies, to comply with the GST requirements, or whether they are platform providers who are hosting solutions which people can easily access and maybe use as a service. So, on the market opportunity, I think GST is certainly a huge positive, because it fast forwards the digitalization of Indian businesses and small and medium businesses, and we think that there is a market opportunity of about $25 billion in this space between now and 2020. On the overall impact on the industry, which affects everybody. As far as the compliance requirements for GST in general are concerned, I think our position has been that it does complicate life from where it used to be, but at the same time recognizing the overall benefits of GST to the economy, we as an industry have been supportive of GST. But our request to the government has been to minimize the the compliance implications of GST, because in its worst case it was quite scary, frankly, where you would have over 100 registrations to be done instead of a single registration, where internal supplies would have to be valued and tax paid and refund claimed, etc., where the place of provision of service would have to be specified for each transaction, despite the nature of transactions in the virtual world not lending themselves to such definition easily. But I think I must say that the government has been pretty responsive to these concerns and has tried to minimize them, but it is still a work in progress. It is not something which I think has completely been addressed, and we are hopeful that as the GST implementation rolls forward, that these difficulties will be minimized, so that compliance to GST does not become a barrier to ease of business.
But a company that is working across or providing goods and services across the country, would they have to register in manifold jurisdictions as per se?
Yes, of course, that's a given.
So isn't that anyways a step towards, not, I mean, I would say harm would be a very strong word, but definitely it doesn't allow ease of doing business that naturally.
Of course, I have already said that from a industry operations perspective, sure, GST does make life more complicated, because in the past the service tax was administered entirely by the central government. So, one authority, one entity, one return, and so on. Now with the states and the center both coming into the picture for all transactions, automatically that for those who are only on the service tax mode with the central government, this change is inevitable. But as I said, these are very early days. We really have to see, but it's essential from the point of view of the industry to ensure that the final configuration doesn't make life any more difficult than it absolutely has to.
Well, before we move forward, it's time to take a quick break, but when we return, we talk more about government initiatives and GST. Stay tuned. You also talked about the opportunities that GST has opened up for a lot of players. How can MSMEs, leverage this opportunity, and what can they work towards to kind of make the best out of this tax regime?
First of all, GST has 2 or 3 implications. Number one is that it has a requirement that all the returns have to be digital, and therefore companies have to be ready. Sure. The second is that the expectation is that because GST by its very nature links a supplier to the next party in the chain and all the way across the whole supply chain, therefore it will bring about greater compliance, which means that a lot of players who were earlier outside the tax net, outside any formal system, will now come into that framework, and many of them, who knows, may be digitizing for the first time. Although previously those who were already paying tax, much of it was already digital. In most of the states it was, center it was, and therefore many of them were already aware of those requirements and were ready for that. But to the extent that a whole new breed of players will come onto this network, they have to be made ready. So that's one opportunity. The second is for those who are already on the digital mode or who will be enabled to come onto the digital mode. The question is, are you just getting into the digital mode in order to comply with the tax requirement? If so, then clearly the benefit of going digital is not being realized at all. So I think there is an opportunity. So once you have got, in a sense, it may or may not be the right term, but once you have got your hook into the customer, you can actually help the customer, that is the customer company, to understand what the benefits of going digital are and how it can help their business, how it can make them more competitive, etc. Here there is an opportunity to help industry in India and small businesses across sectors to embrace digital with open arms and actually derive the productivity gains and the competitiveness and efficiency gains that come from that. And that is where MSMEs need to, number one, equip themselves to be able to deliver that value, and then I think there is certainly a pot of gold over there.
So, I'm going to talk about another government initiative, which is the Skill India initiative that they have started. Are entrepreneurs in the technology and IT space benefiting out of this initiative? Has the quality of manpower really increased or improved? Because at the ground level, you don't really see that much work happening that is being talked about actually.
I think in the transition that the industry is going through, both in India and globally, arguably the most important thing is skilling, and that is what is actually going to make the difference between success and failure in the next few years. We have reached a point where technology evolution is happening so rapidly that almost on a yearly, if not a more frequent basis, you have newer and newer technologies coming up. But at the end of the day, the technology does not operate in a vacuum. It operates in the real world with real people, and people have to be familiar with how to use that technology, how to deploy that technology, how to maintain that technology, and how to modify that or modify solutions as and when needed. So that means that skills which a person acquires have only a very limited shelf life, and constant acquisition of newer skills is the new reality.
Training by companies at an individual level seems to be the only solution which is right now out on paper. But for MSMEs, that's a cost perhaps that they cannot take on. So is there any solution that you would kind of advise for them?
Yeah, I think that is exactly what we have recognized. I completely agree with what you are saying, and we have therefore initiated a program. It is just at the early stages where we are looking at what are the skill areas. There are 8 technology areas like artificial intelligence, mobile computing, and areas like that in cyber security and so on. So 8 technology areas translating into 55 job roles and 155 skills, which have been identified as the most important in the next few years. Of course, that list is not sacrosanct. It can perhaps undergo modifications as we go forward based on developments. But we are in the process of setting up a skilling program which enables skilling on a large scale on a MOOCs basis, the massively online courses, which will enable people, whether they are currently within a company or outside a company or in an educational institution, to actually acquire those skills which are hugely in demand today. That is something which I believe that MSMEs who may not be in a position to build such programs internally can use them, because these are essentially online, number one. Number two, they use content which is available globally. It is not looking at content in India, and nor are we creating fresh content, but it is getting packaged and mapped onto the specific skill areas which are needed.
So, even Digital India is something that entrepreneurs are really bullish about. In fact, even at the NASSCOM Leadership Forum, it was all about embracing everything digital and everything in the scheme of things that fall under digital. So, what are the opportunities that that the MSME entrepreneurs can leverage, whereas the Digital India initiative is concerned?
Yeah.
And are they actually reaping the benefits of it?
We stand at a particularly interesting confluence, which is unprecedented and which I believe is a historic opportunity brought about by many things coming together. We've had the mobile revolution, which has covered the entire country. We are at the early stages of the broadband revolution, which is now beginning to cover different parts of the country, especially the urban areas, and hopefully very soon the rural areas as well. Similarly, we have the whole smartphone revolution, where more and more people are getting onto the smartphone mode. We've had the IT industry, which has now become globally recognized, which has a huge capability. We've had the whole startup boom, where people are coming up with innovative solutions, and many of them now in the last couple of years are looking at India specific problems or India relevant problems in areas like healthcare, agriculture, education, energy and so on. So, all of these I think represent a huge opportunity. And it is not only about government. So, while government has been an enabler, government has put forward this enticing vision of a digital India, I think it is wrong to think of all the opportunities as lying within the government or doing business with the government. So, it is really about looking at the problems that we have in India, especially the persistent and pervasive ones, and then looking at which of them are amenable to breakthrough solutions using the power and scalability of today's technologies. That is one part of it. As far as government itself is concerned, government as an entity which uses technology and which uses these services, I think there are multiple challenges, and it is particularly difficult for an MSME to avail of most of those opportunities. We have had a lot of challenges in the procurement process, we have had a lot of challenges in the payment process, and this is something which we have brought to the attention of the government, and we are trying to resolve them. Progress has been less than ideal, but we are trying to work our way through some of those constraints. But I think there is a recognition that these issues need to be addressed.
But do you see mid-cap and MSME IT companies using technology and digital in a big way now? I mean, that's the way forward for them.
Most certainly. I think that is something which we should definitely be seeing at an increasing pace and to an increasing extent across the economy and across all segments. And we do experience that in our own lives, in all the different services that we are getting, including from governments. Most of the state governments have been also very active adopters. Many of the central government ministries which deal with a large number of people have been active adopters. So, that is something which is here to stay and which is already visible. And I think as a country, we have shown a greater propensity to absorb technology. In fact, I was talking to a delegation from the US, and they were also emphasizing that there is a big shift which is happening both in the US and in India, and in some senses both these are countries which have really adopted technology at a much higher pace than perhaps the average economies.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time and the insight that you've given us on the industry. I'm sure our MSME entrepreneurs will learn a lot from it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That concludes part 1 of the special conversation with the president of NASSCOM. Tomorrow we'll bring you part 2. But if you have anything you want to say to us, do remember you can write in at leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com, tweet at me at Sunanda_J or LOT_ET now on Twitter if you have anything to say to us, or Leaders of Tomorrow in ET now, that's our Facebook page. You can also call us on that number you see on your screen. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.